Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for all things that go bump in the dark and your fan stories told here. I always love getting stories from somebody who tells me how super skeptical they are, that they don't believe it. Seeing is believing, everything is black and white, and there's no such thing as ghost. This story comes in from Becky, who says she was exactly that way until she saw. I thought it was absolutely foolish that my company bought this company. The place was an old warehouse, looked like something from the Industrial Revolution. A walking OSHA violation is all I could keep thinking. It hadn't turned a profit in years, but my company wanted it for the real estate. And it was my job to go in there and kind of get an estimate of what we were looking at. I've always been very black and white. There are no gray areas. As an accountant, numbers are numbers. It is my job to make things make sense. It set me up an office in this old warehouse, and they had already started doing some renovations. That's when the paranormal activity began. I was sitting in the old foreman's office, doing my work, going through some papers, and that's when I started to hear it. Footsteps. It sounded like somebody was coming up the steps. What do they want? What are they bothering me for? I got up from my desk, opened the door, and nobody. Nothing there. Nobody was coming up at the steps at all. In fact, the closest workers were probably a couple 100 feet away. There's no way I would have heard their footsteps. All day long, I continued to hear the footsteps, like somebody was coming up and down these old wooden steps that led to this office. Every time I got up to look to see if somebody was coming, nothing. The footsteps would stop. But it sounded like somebody was walking up and down the steps. I thought maybe some of the construction workers were playing tricks on me, just trying to pick on me, but every time I would go look out the window, they were further away. They were working on what they needed to work on. I started to smell cigarette smoke in the office on a regular basis. I loudly told the construction workers who were nearby, "This is a non-smoking building. You're going to get in trouble. Not only is it a fire hazard, this is our building now. Whatever used to work doesn't work now." But all the construction workers looked at me like I was crazy because none of them were smoking. The office that I was set up in was set up as if somebody had worked there just the other day. Family photos and all sorts of framed awards hanging on the wall. I found one of the workers who had actually been there when the facility was running. They said, "Yeah, that was the foreman's office. He stayed there. In fact, after him and his wife divorced, he lived there, for lack of a better word. But he was a heavy smoker. No wonder why you probably smell cigarette smoke." But this was different. This wasn't a lingering cigarette smoke. This was a cigarette smoke that smelled like somebody had just lit a cigarette. And the footsteps still were happening on a regular basis. I asked the worker again, "Well, what did he do?" "Oh, he would pace all the time. He'd go up and down the steps probably 20, 30 times in an hour. He'd walk up and down the steps and smoke his cigarette, all while he was making phone calls." I hate to tell you, ma'am, but if he was alive today, he never would have sold this building. And you definitely would be sitting at his desk. He was a great guy. When the business started failing, so did he. His health failed, and I don't know if I should be telling you this, but he actually passed away in the office. They found him, and that's probably why we were for sale in the first place. Nobody wanted to continue his legacy. The more stories I heard about this man, the more I felt like we were in tune, like we were feeding off each other's energy. The stories I heard about his power and his control, how he ran his business, it reflected. I felt like I saw myself in this man. In fact, I myself found some of his cigarettes in the desk, and I myself snuck one every now and then. I'd find myself walking up and down the steps, watching the work happen, trying to stay in control, all while I was doing my paperwork. It was like he was somehow living vicariously through me. When the work was done, I felt inclined to take the desk with me. I don't know why. I was drawn to it. I felt its power. I felt his power. I took the desk and put it in my own home. And I know that sounds crazy looking back now, but it just felt right. I couldn't explain it. I needed it. I needed to have it. When all the work was done and we completed everything with the transformation of the building, I felt a overwhelmingly sense of dread and sadness. The building wasn't the same anymore, and it bothered me. I felt like I had lost a piece of my home. I was all of a sudden overwhelmingly sad. I felt like I had lost a piece of me. I never left work early, and I definitely wouldn't call out, but I felt like I needed to go home. I was feeling physically sick. The moment I got to my house, something seemed off. It didn't feel inviting anymore. It felt dark and cold. I opened the front door of my house and the smell was overpowering. It smelled like somebody had smoked thousands of packs of cigarettes in my house. It just had such a tobacco smell. It smelled just like that old office. My own home no longer felt inviting. It felt frightening. And that overpowering sense of cigarette, it kept coming from my office. The office where I had put that desk. Nobody was at the house. It was just me. As I approached the office, I could hear papers rustling. Somebody broken into my house? Somebody in my house? That's what it seemed like. That's what it sounded like. Like somebody was right behind the door. I bravely grabbed the doorknob and I was going to yell at whoever was in there. I was not afraid. Again, I never believed in the paranormal, but I opened that door and surely enough, there he was, sitting at my desk, smoking a cigarette. He looked at me and he was aware that I could see him. I knew exactly who it was. I had seen his pictures and pictures of his family. I had been sitting at his desk and I moved his desk into my house. There he was sitting there. He looked directly at me and said, "You bring my desk back to my office." He vanished. He was gone. I immediately called somebody to help me move the desk. I put it in my car and we drove it back to that office that night. Some things can't be explained, but as somebody who understands order, numbers, and facts, I can see how what I did in life would follow me in death. I had taken from him. I had stolen from him, and he needed his desk back.